Jameek Clovey. I'm the Digital Community Manager here at Enable, supporting the Rebate Strategist community. And I'm delighted to have you guys join us today for the top 5 ideas and trends leading in rebates and pricing leading into 2026. Welcome to our webinar. A quick hour. We'll go through these couple of admin notes before I introduce our wonderful panel that we have today. Folks are automatically muted on the call. There is a question section. You can ask questions over the course of the meeting. We'll answer as many as we can before the end. And yeah, without any further ado, I'll introduce 2 of our folks here, fantastic people. We have starting with Kevin Betts, who is our senior rebate advisory manager on the Enable team. And then we have Barry Edney, who is a pricing consultant with Burning Issues Consulting. Welcome, you 2. So glad to see you guys today.
Thank you, Jameek. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting. Very good to attend.
And so really, we wanted to start and really to lay the context here. Obviously, the year 2025 has been a transformative year for both rebates and pricing. We are relatively fresh off of our Elevate roadshow series of going to the UK and then Melbourne and Sydney, and talking with Enable customers, talking with prospects, talking with the field and the world of rebates and pricing on what's the current state of the industry and how do we move into 2026 with fresh ideas and ready to kind of meet the moment, right? The volatility, the changes in the industry. And so obviously we're joined here by 2, not just attendees, but presenters at Elevate in Kevin and Barry. We're going to walk through really the 5 trends that we saw, and we'll list them out one by one. And the first one that I wanted to come into, I think I mentioned it, really that word volatility. I think I don't have to speak to anybody in the crowd today that we are living in a volatile time in the supply chain. And so really, I would love to hear from the both of you about what that experience has been for you, right? What volatility have you seen, and kind of how do you see companies managing that now and potentially managing it better as we get into the new year?
Okay, well, I'll jump in there first. Interesting, today in the UK, they announced the inflation figures, which did drop, but not as much as they hoped. A lot of businesses being interviewed on business publications on the news, really talking about the challenge of managing the business in that rising cost environment. And they all talked to a certain degree about the volatility. And for me, it's really about getting a handle on everything, that's all those moving parts. And speed is of the essence, as we've said many times, I think, over the last couple of years. The faster we can act, the faster we have to react because of the environment we're in. And the only way for me to make that, I can see to make that work, is when we get real integration, when we get that real-time visibility of where rebates are in that pricing waterfall, where the costs are in that. We used to lump things under variable selling costs at one point. We're not sure where it goes, we'll put it in there. You can't do that anymore. You've really got to know where the costs are, where the issues are. And it's the integration of ERP, CRM, pricing software, rebate management software, relying on spreadsheets and notes in diaries and notes on the CRM and notes in the a shared spreadsheet on the server and email exchanges. That doesn't cut it anymore. You can't audit that. You can't react quickly to it. You can't gather the data quickly. You can't analyze quickly. You've got to bring it all together into one, if not one system, then certainly link the system so you get one version of the truth, one set of numbers that you can act on quickly.
Yeah, I think that Barry, for me, has hit the nail on the head there with that, the speed and the ability to respond quickly to changes in a volatile world. Enable's context is interesting here. I think over the course of 2025, we had the acquisition of FlintFox. So on top of our core discipline of rebate management, we've now added pricing into the mix as well. And obviously prices are on the front edge of this. They're really on the front line, facing into this volatility. So agility has been a real buzzword for us in 2025. Businesses wanting to achieve agility with their pricing, and Barry's touched on it there in terms of that speed, that ability to respond to issues as they arrive, and having that agility built into your system, so the tools and the processes, the systems that you use, but also having people arranged in such a way where agility is a reality. It doesn't take you 30 days to respond to a certain event. You can respond quickly. You can at least keep up with your competition, if not beat them to the punch in that regard. And so, yeah, the speed of reaction, the agility to respond to volatility is absolutely key. I'm sure we would have been talking about this volatility regardless in our rebate management discipline 6-9 months ago, but the pricing element has really brought that to the forefront for us. Barry, I'm interested to just ask you, if you don't mind, just in terms of the balance between agility and perhaps responding to every factor, every headline, every piece of news that comes up. I've seen some businesses that they go whole hog on the agility thing. They want to react quickly to everything, but they're then built in such a way where their knee-jerk reaction to everything that comes up, every headline, every news article, everything that their competitors do, they see that as something they need to respond to. Is there a balance in your mind between being agile but also doing so in a measured way, where you take a step back and only
Absolutely.
respond to the things that warrant a response?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is where the experience of the commercial team comes in, and just because you can doesn't mean you should. And there's always that balance between the agility and the governance. And obviously, where I speak to most of the clients is about managing those margins and improving those margins. And we do that through managing the process, managing what we give away in terms of discounts and rebates, and managing the customers. The old-fashioned account management. So yes, we need the ability to react quickly if we need to, but just because something happens doesn't mean say we have to react. We have to look at it and look at it quickly to decide if we do need to react. But if it takes you a week to understand what you could do, it's too late. If it takes you a couple of hours, well, I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do nothing. Well, then you can decide in a couple of hours, and you can choose to take no action, some action, or some other action. I always say no action is perfectly fine as long as it's a considered decision. If no action is taken because nobody has the data and nobody can be bothered to authorize it, or they kick the can down the road, that's a bad thing. But a conscious decision to take no decision is perfectly okay, because you've considered all the parameters, all the implications, and that's your decision. No, we're fine as we are. So yes, there's always that balance between reaction, governance, and do I really need to react just because the competitor's racing to the bottom? Do we need to? Can we restate our value? Can we support the client in a better way? There's always options.
And often, I suppose, when we think about reactions, we're reacting to something that's happened upstream of us in the supply chain, aren't we? It's often a cost impact, something that's been implemented by our suppliers. So I guess having end-to-end agility within our own businesses, where the buying side is talking to the selling side, sales and pricing are talking to procurement. And so if we are having to factor into our sales out pricing something that's happened on the buy side, all of that is joined up, and we are having those conversations, because if we have a disjointed organization there, then the message from buying doesn't reach selling, and we don't know that we have a response that's required.
Absolutely, it is that joined up approach. And many years ago, I was involved in an SNOP implementation project, and I learned so much there about the importance of cross-functional collaboration and sharing that insight. And one of the key things, one of the lessons I've carried with me since, is that need to create what I would call leading indicators, rather than having that real struggle to get the commercial team to come up with a forecast for procurement to use or manufacturing to use. You know, what are the things in the market we see that we know indicate a change in buying behavior from the market? The US, for example, tracks miles driven, which is, you know, is calculated from fuel consumption. So when the automotive industry sees that figure drop, which it does when times are tough, well, miles driven has dropped, so there'll be fewer accidents, fewer car repairs, fewer parts required. It's a key leading demand indicator. Every industry has one or more leading indicators. Just need to identify what they are. Build that into your demand plan, or use it as an input to your demand plan, and then that really helps you forward plan your procurement, forward plan your manufacturing, better plan your raw materials or your finished goods purchasing. Yes, there's always something going to get in the way, maybe. Exchange rates may come in, a tariff may come in, but you can create some you know, really solid scenarios that give you really the level of comfort in your pricing and your rebate setting.
So I think obviously you guys are touching on like the theme of finding that information within the chaos, right? That if volatility is the new normal, then part of that adjustment to the new normal is processes. It's making those decisions and being timely. So I have a question for the two of you. Out of this, and obviously we have people from both the rebate world and the pricing world. I'd love to hear from each of you, kind of, if there's one tangible thing that a person could do today to kind of fight that volatility. And if they came to you and asked you, what could I do? What's one quick thing you would tell them? And I'll start with you, Kevin, just because you're the first person on my screen.
So you'll let Kevin go first this time.
Give you some thinking time.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think planning ahead, scenario planning, it's impossible to predict every possible scenario that could happen, but actually taking the time to think about the different things that are moving in your world, understanding which you can influence, which ones you can't influence, is a key part of that process. But just imagining all of those different scenarios, what could happen, and what would our response be in that scenario when the real world catches up with us and the situation presents itself that we do need to respond to. As I say, it's unlikely that we would have predicted it perfectly, because that's just not how these things work, but we would at least have something to base our response on, some kind of context, a way forward, a framework to work to. I think sitting back and thinking we'll respond as and when things happen is pretty risky, because you're starting from ground zero. You need to at least give yourself a couple of steps ahead in that race by doing some of that thinking, by thinking about what could happen, how would we respond, and then whatever your findings are from that, molding that to the real world as and when it's applicable.
Awesome. What's that?
I would concur with that. I mean, I think that's you know, as Kevin says, you can't predict everything, but going back to my leading indicators, you can scenario plan and consider, well, what things would likely affect us. Therefore, we need to monitor those things and identify some indicators that might give us a heads up. And so the two things are linked. And if you can, you know, a bit of brainstorming to figure out what headwinds could hit us. Okay, how do we try and see them coming further away than being a nasty surprise? I think that's key. And then also figuring out, well, if that does happen, what do we do? What are our options going to be? So you don't have to figure that out from a blank sheet of paper when it happens. You've got pre-planned actions that you could take given the circumstances.
And also, and it really comes back to that, like that planning through the chaos, right? And you can't plan for everything. There are unknown unknowns, so to speak, right? Things that you don't even know that you don't know. But the goal is to really think through the things that you do know and codify them, right? That's great.
Yeah.
And also a great natural segue, right? These decisions that are being done are not done in a vacuum, right? They're done with different teams working together. Obviously, we have a rebate expert and a pricing expert. And our second theme, our second trend, kind of boils that down, is that rebates and pricing are converging, right? I think that we often, to use the dreaded corporate term, we are siloed, right? In how we kind of think of these two as separate functions that are only tangentially related to each other, other than being part of two pieces of a wider strategy. And so I'm curious of your thoughts on really that particular trend. Again, rebates and pricing are not just separate anymore, they are converging. And Barry, I picked on Kevin last time, I'm going to pick on you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely right. I mean, when I first started, as you can tell by the grey hair, I started in sales a very long time ago, and rebates was something the sales organisation took care of. You know, pricing team set a price. We were given guidelines for discount, but then we had more latitude in rebates that we just decided ourselves. They were commercial decisions, you know, and there's always that strategic account. Oh, you're not very big, but they're strategic, and we should, you know, all those arguments. And you know, the number of businesses I've been to help them with their margin, and I speak to the finance team, and they say, oh yeah, but sales keep giving us surprises. They suddenly give us a piece of paper with the manager's signature at the end of the year saying, oh, we promised this customer this rebate, and it's not been accrued for, it's not allocated anywhere. Although I have to say that happens less often these days. But now I'm seeing what I've been encouraging myself for a few years is just to make that part of that same conversation. So a pricing and margin strategy that has rebates as part of the toolkit, not as an afterthought managed by sales. Just keep it in there. And of course, when you're looking at that margin, running your what if scenarios on your margin, that includes everything in there. And ideally, you should include cost to serve as well. Because if your margin's squeezed but your cost to serve is high, well, that's not really smart. You know, you can sacrifice a little bit of margin if your cost to serve is low. Perhaps the customer's on your doorstep and collects the goods himself. Who knows? Yeah, looking at rebates, and then we spoke in Birmingham, and Kevin touched on it just now. That connection between the sales and the procurement or manufacturing. If we know that we're close to hitting a rebate target from one of our vendors, why would we not target our salespeople to go out and meet that target and stop selling some of this other stuff that we don't get a rebate for, and hit this target? And that integration is not always there, even though when the systems are there, I don't always see those conversations happening. That's why that, not necessarily a full S&OP program, but that S&OP way of working is really beneficial.
Yeah, just adding on to that, it's great to have Barry on this call, and it's great to have him at Elevate. I don't know if you remember, Barry, but at the end of the panel that you sat on, I asked a question around this topic of kind of rebates and pricing and how they sit together and when they perhaps don't. This is, to be completely honest, a bit of a journey that I've been on over the course of this year with the context of the Flint Fox acquisition. I think instinctively, maybe I see these two disciplines in the black and white of a pricing waterfall, and so rebates just, it feels like a component of the net price, just as any other component might be. It helps you to arrive at that net price that you're charging to your customers, and so it kind of feels like rebates, pricing, they're almost one and the same, or at least the rebates as a component of the pricing. But the more we talk about pricing and the more we get into this world, the more we realize that that isn't always necessarily the case. They are often two separate disciplines with good kind of historic reasons in certain industries where it's made sense to have them managed separately. Sometimes pricing done as kind of a central discipline, and then the rebates as you say, commercial teams, more local teams having a bit of autonomy over that end margin piece that they're managing. But it's fascinating to explore this, because I think there's probably as many different setups as there are companies out there, and that's the question that I asked just to get Barry's and the panel's view at Elevate, was just, is there a right way of doing this? Should rebates be kind of locked onto pricing? Should they be the same department? Should we keep them separate? And as is often the case with these things, it really was a case of it depends. It depends on the industry. It depends on how you're operating. Of course, yeah. But I think it's true. It's always going to be the case. As I say, you've got such variety.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is it does need to be linked to the margin, and it can't just lump into the margin waterfall under rebates and other, or discounts and rebates. It needs to be managed separately. In the worst case scenario, a rebate is just discount in arrears. The customer's going to get it anyway, whatever they do. It should be integrated, as I said, in part of that margin waterfall, that overall pricing margin discussion. One of the tools in the toolkit that's part of that strategic decision. How much do we give as discount? How much do we give as rebate? Do we use rebate at all for this customer and less so for that customer? But if you do have a rebate, it has to drive a certain buying behavior. And with more and more companies, particularly distribution companies, relying on their vendor rebates to drive their gross margin, they need to be very careful, because if they don't hit their purchase goals, their cost price changes, and what they thought was a decent margin with this customer turns out to be nothing at all. So that you've got to have that end-to-end collaboration internally to know what you're doing, what you're not doing. And that's why it's very important to set that clear pricing and margin strategy at the beginning that includes all of the tools in your toolbox to drive that. Now, whether that be conditional pricing on volatile products, whether that be minimum rebates, or an example I used in Birmingham was if you introduce a new product, turn off the rebate on the current product and only make it on a new product. Otherwise, your new product won't take off. Maybe that's a lesson for the Chancellor with EVs. If you want people to adopt EVs, don't put the price up, put the price down, and put the price up on the combustion engines. That's what I would do. Hey, not in politics. Probably a reason for that. So yes, it's got to be, whatever you do, every circumstance, every business, every market will be different. But within that, there are some common sense things that you can do. But above all, have it all connected, have it all integrated.
Yeah, I suppose fundamentally how close those teams are, if they're ultimately pulling in different directions, then they're creating a gap, and often it's into that gap where we find margin leakage happening. If those two teams are pulling in different directions or trying to achieve the same thing but independent of each other, that's where we can give away a bit too much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that cost to serve I mentioned before. I mean, I've come across situations where, on paper, the customer deserves a rebate. Very big. He's buying the products that he's incentivized to buy through the rebate. Numbers look good, but then you look at cost to serve, and you find that yes, but he's having 10 small drops a week instead of 2 large drops a week. All of those things add to your cost. Hang on a minute, there's a mismatch here. So I really do encourage, if you look at that cost to serve as well as the price and the rebate, it's just another element in that waterfall. You can negotiate around that. But it does come back to, and I mentioned it again in Birmingham, what I would call old-fashioned account management. You have to have those conversations with your larger customers, and you have to have a realistic businessman to businessman or business person to business person discussion, because they understand you've got to make a living. We understand they've got to make a living. There's a conversation to be had around they can't have everything.
I think there's well, thank you both for that. And I think thank you guys for really doing a great job setting me up with these segues into our different trends.
We did try.
You guys have both used the phrase, and I'm paraphrasing both of you, but tool in the toolkit, right? And so I think I'm going to bring up the elephant in the room as far as toolkits over the last couple of years, artificial intelligence, AI, right? And so our trend number 3 is AI is no longer experimental, right? And I think there's from a layperson's perspective, the understanding of AI is one of 2 different things, right? It's either the Terminator, like it's coming to destroy you, or it's coming to take your job, right? And so I think knowing that kind of the effective use of AI is really important across industries, across the globe. I'm curious about your takes on how AI, again, is becoming a closer and tighter part of both pricing and rebates. And Barry, I picked on you last time, so Kevin, you're up.
I thought that might be the case. Yeah, AI has been ever present this year, hasn't it? And I don't think there's any reason to expect that as we look forward to 2026 that anything is going to change there. I've read a piece recently, and it's great being that Enable is a partner of Microsoft, being able to kind of mention it and bring it to the table here. Microsoft have done a piece here, a report titled 2025, the year the frontier firm is born. And this discusses kind of the future of AI as a tool going forward, and how it's going to become more and more embedded into teams. And it is very much around that idea of frontier firms, those that are taking the first step, kind of breaching that frontier for the first time. And their prediction, and I think it seems very sensible, is that this will happen generally in 3 phases. Phase 1 is probably where lots of businesses find themselves now, which is AI as an assistant, so very much as a tool. Phase 2, you go beyond that, where AI becomes much more integrated into the team. So you have human team members working alongside AI agent team members doing work together. And then phase 3, kind of when it's fully realized, is the agents kind of being the team itself, but it's the human mind, the human judgment, and the human relationship management that sits over that, guiding those agents towards certain goals. And I think in context of pricing and rebates, where I see all of this falling into place is really around the question of scale, because whenever we talk about agility, what we're really talking about is being able to do lots of work quickly. And that's where AI can really support us. It is coming in and doing it over however many thousands, hundreds of thousands of SKUs that we might have, geographies, divisions, different customer accounts demanding different prices for whatever reasons. What would take an army of people weeks to do, AI can do much more efficiently, much sooner, and deliver those outcomes for us. So that's where I kind of see the intersection of AI and pricing. It is achieving those things that used to take a lot of time or were just unimaginable. We can't do something at that scale, and so we just have to do a broad brush approach across all of our customers. Anecdotally, from the rebate side of things, I worked in supplier rebates for a number of years. We had a team of 5 dedicated to supplier rebates, and I now realize, speaking to more and more businesses, that was a real luxury to have 5 people full-time working on rebates. But even with that relatively large team, we couldn't deal with every single trading agreement in detail. We didn't own every single relationship. We owned the top ones, kind of a Pareto principle of look after the top 20 that represent 80% of the value. But outside of that, the accounts tend to be unmanaged. And so there's no way we could have been optimizing them. We were kind of managing them jointly, and as and when issues came up, but we weren't constantly monitoring them, reviewing them, analyzing the data, and making decisions accordingly. So yeah, the AI introduced into that space would allow us to guide an agent, a tool to much better manage those relationships, actually have a specific approach, or at least track them individually, and respond accordingly, rather than just having to focus on a subset that we deem to be the most important.
Absolutely. And again, from a layperson's perspective, I think in the era of lean teams, I've heard it described that AI is the tool that helps you get to the other billion things on your checklist, right? Yeah. Is that it takes some of the manual labor that you would spend a lot of time doing and allows you to do the other stuff that you need your brain for, and that human capital, that human mind for. And so Barry, please go ahead too.
Yeah, I mean, I would summarize it saying use the AI for the heavy lifting, not the decision making itself. You know, that you can get AI to do the grunt work, because the analytics does take so long to pull the data together, put the questions together, pull the parameters, run the analysis, try this scenario, that scenario. You know, once you've set it up, it'll do it repeatedly, very, very fast, in seconds usually, if the data's available, and you've created the queries. Then you can add the context. Then you can interpret what's come out of it. Then you can start adding your experience and knowledge of the markets and knowledge of the customers, and that's where it's useful. So what, if I think back to when I was first involved with pricing 20 odd years ago, we had a pricing team we had four people who were, I guess, the real pricing team, and they had 3 or 4 supporting analysts, ex-finance people. Now that whole team could do what they did, with one pricing person and one analyst driving the AI. But that organization hasn't chosen to do that. They've got the same team. They're just doing more because they can. They're doing more faster.
And that's what it is. It's doing more, right? It's allowing you to scale down.
Doing more, achieving more. Keeping the margin line where it needs to be. They did have an experiment some years ago. My colleague who was working there, he moved to another team, and they decided not to replace him. And funnily enough, they noticed the margin started to go down because, again, they weren't so responsive. They were letting things slide. And so they realized that actually we may not be improving anymore, but if we don't keep supporting this, it's going to slide. So they realized the team was a worthwhile investment, and it's back up to full strength again.
Awesome. I have a question for the two of you on this one before we come to our next trend. Is what advice would you give to someone who is implementing AI on their team, as far as mistake to avoid, principle that you found helpful or you've seen a company have success with in rebates and pricing? And so, Kevin, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I've kind of a stock answer on this one that I always come back to, and it's around, well, firstly, do a comprehensive process map, understand where you are currently with the tools and the systems, the processes that you have in place today, and then look to pinpoint actual pain points or efficiencies that you can achieve within that landscape. I think throwing AI at a process just because you have budget, just for the sake of it, isn't going to deliver the results, the efficiencies that you're looking for. So pinpoint actual challenges, actual pain points, and then see how AI can be a solution for those, rather than investing in a tool because you feel like you need to jump on that AI bandwagon, but without a particular issue that you're solving for.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's I think a number of organizations have invested in AI, whether it be pricing software or some other tool, and I hope that it's the magic bullet. It's going to fix all their problems. It doesn't. AI works wonderfully if you tell it what you want. Yeah. It's all down to the prompts or the cues that you give it. So for me, on top of that, Kevin, I would suggest just start off by being clear what you want from it. Yeah. What is this meant to deliver? What pain is it going to take away? What new thing is it going to allow you to do that you couldn't do before? And then follow your process and build the plan accordingly. Because just installing AI because you can will just mean you do what you do now only a little bit quicker. So what?
Well said. Before we jump into our next trend, trend number 4, just a quick exhortation to our attendees. Feel free to throw a question in the questions pane, and I'll read them out. Obviously, we have some questions here sourced from the community, then we can read those out as well. But I want to make sure that you guys are aware that in GoToWebinar, you type a question, it'll pop up, and I'm happy to keep them anonymous. I won't read anybody's names, and feel free to throw them in. And obviously, one of the core kind of overriding themes of our conversation today is the leaning into things that help you work better together, right? And so our trend number 4 is that partners are your growth engine. Excuse me. So partnerships are your growth engine. Really the way to move forward again through that volatility, through just changing times, investing in your partnerships. So I'd love to hear from the both of you, kind of how you experience that, and your takeaway from this year, and really what you're thinking of for next year. And Kevin, again, I believe you last time. So Barry, you are up, my friend.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Well, I think again, I mentioned this at Elevate in Birmingham, and I mentioned it already today. I call it, is going back to that old-fashioned account management. Actually having a conversation with your partners, your distribution partners, or your supplier partners. you know, just having that joint business planning. It's not about having a discussion when there's a problem or we want them to buy more or you want to negotiate the rebate. Regular planning discussions really make it collaborative. Obviously, you've got to be careful about you know, competition law and all those things, but there's no reason why you can't collaborate as partners. And I come back to think about it. A book. My first book, the first edition of this book, when it first came out, I think in the early 90s, by Peter Cheverton. He, many years ago, he worked for ITI. This is the third edition. The original version I had fell apart because it was thumbed and had notes in and all sorts. So this is another edition. It's a bit better condition. But he talks about key account management. I would actually describe it as strategic account management. And the same rules apply with partnerships. And he refers to the diamond model versus the this conventional model. I'm not sure how well that's going to come up on screen, but I will try. You know, you've got a vendor and a supplier and one point of contact in between. Diamond model, all the functions on partner and on the supplier, sorry, vendor and the partner, they have that direct collaboration. So if anybody wants to Google it, Peter Cheverton, key account management, diamond model, great way of approaching partner relationships, if not key customer relationships. That's all I would say on that. I think that's absolutely key, and I'm really pleased that it's coming back to the fore. These partnership collaborations are so important, because I think the last few years we seem to have forgotten that in the commercial world, that we can't just automate everything. We still need this collaboration, this real working together, not just get an order via email, send it off when it's processed.
I love that, Barry. I just wrote in the chat for everyone's the first meeting of the Rebates and Pricing Book Club. So be the subscribe for our next one. I love that.
As you can probably tell, I'm a bit enthusiastic about this. It's served me well over the years.
I genuinely love it. I feel like more people should just read up on these. That is great.
Well, it's interesting. I went and grabbed this off the bookshelf, and the bookmark was in the right place from last time I referenced it. That's the key. That's the key section.
Yeah. Kevin, we'd love to hear your thoughts too, and please also include a book.
I think I can actually. I think I can. Bring this back to Elevate. Barry shared the stage on the panel with Keith Wright, another partner of Enables. Keith is a procurement specialist. He spent a lot of time in the same industry as me in builders merchants in the UK. My own experience in finance, but his very much in procurement for a couple of decades. And joint business planning, collaboration is absolutely at the heart of everything Keith talks about. And I think that is to some extent a reaction to his experience in that industry, where often supply negotiations felt like going into battle. You kind of butting heads and trying to squeeze everything out of the supplier, whilst the supplier was trying to give away as little as possible. And naturally, that is a part of a negotiation. But I think Keith's viewpoint, and I've heard him speak on this a couple of times, is we've got plenty of competitors out there, people that want to take margin from us and want to take business from us. Treating our customers, our suppliers, our trading partners as competitors as well isn't a healthy way to go. We need to collaborate. We need to keep an eye on each other's success, build a plan that is mutually beneficial and that can deliver success for both parties. So Keith has a book that now that he's a consultant in his own right. I think he talks about joint business planning from memory in exactly this way. So it's, as Barry says, it's nice to see a bit of a change in the standard way of doing things, away from that more combative way of working with trading partners, but knowing that Keith is advocating that from the buy side, and Barry and the author that he mentions from the sell side, those two things converging. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's much more.
I'm not really royalties, don't worry. No, I agree. I mean, as I mentioned, I started in the commercial world in sales and then moved into marketing and then commercial excellence and pricing. But all my sales success all those years was all through distribution partners. So that collaboration was key, and that's why I got onto Peter Cheverton's work, as I became more senior, responsible for bigger and bigger accounts, it became more and more important to work in a way that bred success and not bred competition.
Yeah,
mutual success, I should have said.
Yeah, and I guess I wouldn't be doing my job at this point if I didn't mention rebates. Rebates as a tool for that collaboration, achieving that mutual success. As you say, discounts in arrears or secondary discounts might be referred to as rebates because they come after the invoice on that waterfall. But really what we're talking about from the point of view of collaboration is something where both parties win. Maybe the customer delivers the volume for the supplier, and therefore they're at a volume where they can afford to share a bit of that success, share some of that margin. Rebates being a key tool for collaboration, joint business planning, and achieving that mutual success.
Yeah, indeed. As I've said repeatedly, both today and at Elevate, rebate from a pricing point of view, rebates are great if they have a purpose.
Yeah.
If they're just bolted on at the end, they're just discounts in arrears and they're extra admin for no gain.
Absolutely.
Or extra rebate and extra risk if you don't accrue for them.
I love that understanding of kind of mutualism, right? That I think obviously in my role as manager of the rebate strategist community, I see in the community some tentativeness about sharing because the idea that it's a zero-sum game where it's so often it's not, right? It really is a need to understand the mutual benefits of both sides. So love that. And so I think obviously you guys, and the question I was going to ask was, how do you guys see partnerships looking in 2026? But I think that I can surmise based on your answers, there really is a pivoting into more humanity, right? Like more of that, like interpersonal, more of that understanding the mutual benefit of partnership and leaning into that as a growth engine.
I think we mentioned the tools. Sorry, Kevin, Jimmy. We mentioned earlier on about the ability for AI to do the grunt work, and if you've got the AI doing the grunt work, that means more time for you to pick up the phone or have a Zoom call, have a Teams call with your partners, and just talk about, well, how are we going to get this goal? We've both got this big, huge goal. Or I've given you a goal in order to reach your rebate from me. How do I help you get that? Because if you win, I win.
Exactly, and that is really making that case, right? Kind of understanding how to make that. I love that. And that's actually again another great segue, guys, into our last trend for 2026. Which is your human edge matters the most, right? So we talked about AI, we talked about efficiency, we talked about volatility, but it's really the strength of your teams and the kind of the processes and the work that you do that makes things shine. I think there was a really prevalent trend during the roadshow and really in the conversations that all of us have been having over the last year. So would love to hear kind of your thoughts on that. Again, I think I can't remember who I pushed on last time. I think Kevin, I think it's your turn to face the game.
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right. When I think about this human element, there's one anecdote that I always tend to come back to. Thinking back 5 years now to COVID times, as I say, working in builders merchants at the time, and production pretty much across the industry slowed down. And then as demand started to ramp up again, there was a shortage across loads of product lines. It's not unique to that industry, but that was kind of where I was at the time, and so that's why I felt that trend biting. In most cases, our bigger suppliers, key strategic suppliers, put their customers onto allocation. They said we have a certain amount of product available, and we will allocate a certain proportion of that to each of our customers. And it was evident where we had good relationships, good human interactions built over a number of years, where we had supported them in the past, and therefore they were willing to support us. It was with those suppliers where we had the best allocations, where we could get the product into our branches and we could trade relatively normally on those particular product lines. Where we hadn't invested that time, or where we just kind of been very transactional with those suppliers, that allocation wasn't there, and it was much more difficult to get the product. So the human element it goes a long way in those scenarios where it really matters, where you really need to lean on that relationship and call in a favor in return for something maybe that you've done in the past, or at the very least with a supplier that you've just treated fairly, you've been reasonable with, and you haven't looked to squeeze every penny out of them historically. That can really kind of come to your rescue, be a real benefit in those scenarios where things are tough. And in the volatile world that we described as we kicked off, I think those kind of scenarios may well be ahead of us. And so having invested time and care into relationships, we felt the rewards from doing so. So I think that's something that an AI can't give you. You don't get that favoritism, if we want to kind of badge it up like that, off the back of just pointing your AI at a trading partner and saying, well, this is the black and white data that comes out of the system. This is how we're operating with you. This is the basis of our trading relationship. Applying the judgment of a human, but also the ability to build relationships is really the moral of that particular story for me, and it's one that I carry forward with me.
I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, as we said, the AI can do the analysis, in a heartbeat. But it's that strategic thinking and that commercial instinct that the AI hasn't figured out yet. And also that risk and ethical assessment. Where does that sit? That still needs that human judgment, I believe. And one of the other speakers in the Elevate event said something that stuck with me. Young lady Georgia was talking about AI, and she said, when you think about it, we all thought that Excel would put accountants out of work. It hasn't. It just meant that they can actually apply their judgment and strategy and business brains more than they were able to in the past, because they're not up to here in bookkeeping. And I think it's the same with AI. If we use it in the right way, the good well set up AI systems will give us the scenarios and the insights. It'll flag the risks and the opportunities, and it'll help us then apply the why and help us understand what potential trade-offs there are. But at the end of it, you've got to let humans make the call, and you've got to have the humans make the relationships, as you're just saying, Kevin.
Well said, both of you. I think this is again, that's a great way to end the trends of our 5 trends, right? Is that marriage of the human element with all the processes, AI, like everything that we've talked about, to lead into, at the end of the day, you want to give your teams and your people the ability to use that human edge, like to make the best of your trading relationships. So absolutely love that. We have a pretty sticky audience, which is great. People are staying to listen to us. We don't have any questions. I do have a couple of questions here that I can ask, just to make sure, and frankly, partially from my own curiosity, and then we can always close up. So this is a really great one here. What do you think trading partners, like if you are in a hypothetical seat here, what would you want your trading partners to understand better in 2026 than they understood in this past year? Like what's a concept, a thought that if you could embed it in their heads, that they get it now, what would be that thing? No pressure. And Barry, you would be the first person to go up, because
yes, I was expecting that. No, I think based on what I've learned from my clients this year, I think certainly from my clients' point of view, most of their partners, their trading partners, have a better understanding of their challenges than they did before. So because it's been so tough for everybody, I think those conversations have started to happen. Those conversations that we've been recommended are starting to happen. I'd like to see that continue, and I think people are realizing, or people within the businesses are realizing, actually, if I talk to my trading partners, both my distribution partners and my vendors, you know what, this sort of works. We can collaborate here without breaking any rules. We can understand each other's challenges, understand each other's pain, and we can help each other succeed. And I'd like to see that continue in 2026. I hope it will.
Awesome. Kevin?
Yeah, I think just building on that point, was seen with a couple of interactions that we've had, that initially when you present this idea of collaboration and kind of having the back of your trading partners, some people can be a bit skeptical. They can think, well, this is all very good in theory, but in practice, it's a tough world out there, and we need to negotiate hard, and we need to look after ourselves above anyone else. And I've seen a couple of instances where that skepticism has been somewhat eroded, has been addressed by a bit of success, people taking the plunge and kind of deviating from that point of view where, yeah, we need to negotiate hard and squeeze everything we can out of our trading partners. And people have been pleasantly surprised where they've gone down a more collaborative route. They have been more interested in joint business planning and the success of their partners, and then they're enjoying the results of that as it all unwinds. So I think, yeah, looking forward to 2026, I would just implore people to, if you have those skepticisms, those uncertainties, if you do doubt that this is the real world versus the theoretical worlds, maybe just give it a go. Open up your mind to seeing it as a possibility, and who knows, you might see similar success to those examples that I'm referring to.
Jamaica, you hearing similar feedback from the rebate community that you chair?
Yes, and so I think that overall, Kevin spoke to it, the anxiety, right, and the tentativeness. I think obviously volatility creates that environment,
Yeah.
And so I would have the same advice as the both of you, right, is to take that step, like not necessarily to be not be afraid. I think it's telling a bunch of finance professionals to like not be cautious, right, is anathema to everything that you guys like learned, right? But I would say one is to become more knowledgeable. That's my take, right? If I based on my feedback from the rebate strategist community, become more knowledgeable is read a one pager, like attend a webinar like this, like get more information that really helps clarify your decisions. I'm glad to see that we actually have a question. It was great. Thank you for the attendee to ask question here. It's a perfect segue, actually. I always find that change is the constant. Volatility seems more unanticipated change. Yeah, volatility seems more unanticipated change or faster change than normal. Is there any, or are there any specific changes creating the volatility trend? Any specific changes that are creating the volatility trend? It's a great, what do you call it?
Well, apart from your president's tariffs, you mean?
Apart from the current, yes, tariff regime. Not that.
I mean, I find that hard to answer really, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. In the UK, we've got our big financial, our chancellor, head of, Minister of Finance, whatever title they have around the world, is doing the financial statement on Wednesday of next week, a week today. There's all sorts of speculation about what she may or may not change, what taxes she may impose, what taxes she may change, or allowances she may change. And that is making a lot of people very, very cautious. Last year, she imposed a lot of costs on businesses, which was something very unexpected, but they did have time to plan for it. She gave them a good lead time into it. Yeah, I mean, I think volatility by its nature also means it's fairly unpredictable, but it comes back to my earlier point about, or I come back to my earlier point I made about trying to identify leading indicators. So although it may not take the volatility away, it might help you see it coming, if you see what I mean. I'm not sure. I'm not comfortable I completely answered the question, but
no, I think obviously for that listener, feel free to add context if there's any more. I felt good with that answer, but to the question, please add more if you have more clarification you want. I have another question actually, which is great. Thank you guys for asking your questions. I must say this is my favorite meeting. Great job, Kevin and Barry. So
thank you.
That's good job. Do you feel there are any downfalls to utilizing AI, or anything we should keep in mind when building the context to start to utilize this tool?
I can jump in there.
Yeah, please do, Barry. Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, the reason I wanted to jump in there, I had this very conversation with somebody a few days ago, and one of the things that I've found the big pitfall is just relying on the output for the AI without validating it, without covering all the points we've discussed today. If it's just, this was about an AI pricing tool, and if you just put the AI generated price out there, it's just come from a black box. Nobody trusts it. The sales team don't trust it. The sales support team don't trust it. And most importantly of all, the customer doesn't trust it. If you can't justify it, that's where the human interface needs to come in. The human needs to be able to justify the price and be able to wrap the value story around it, so that it can be communicated clearly. And whether that be in the PowerPoint the company's in the sales brochure, in the conversation, whatever, however it's delivered, that is so important. And again, as we said earlier on, the human should do the decision making, the AI should do the grunt work.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I think we're almost at time. So I think we can close from here. A big thank you to both Kevin and Barry for your insight and expertise. And
it's been great. Thanks for hosting us, Jimmy, and great to meet you again, Kevin. And really enjoyed that. It was a really good, interesting discussion.
Yeah, likewise, Barry. Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
This is great. A couple of last minute notes for our attendees. Obviously, conversations like this happen in the Rebate Strategist community. He's a co-sponsor of this event. I encourage you to join. I'm going to send, or we'll send over a follow-up email with both our post meeting survey, as well as a link to join the community. A lot of great conversation and resources in there for folks. Any closing words, Kevin, Barry, before we end for the day?
Oh, you go first this time, Kevin.
Yeah, I think we've had a few themes, haven't we?
Yeah.
I think the collaboration theme is key for me. It's at the heart of what Enable does and kind of the ethos that we've been built on. Great to hear from Barry that he's seeing not entirely or just influenced by the work that Enable's doing, but just hearing that out there in the real world that businesses are kind of catching up to that ethos and seeing the supply chain as a collaboration, as a team game, rather than an extra layer of competition, I think is really positive. So just carrying forward that message will stand lots of people in good stead going forward. I think so. I think we need to rely on each other. And you know, just my closing words were just to echo the attendee who sent the question in. You know, change is constant, and you know, the only thing you can rely on is things will change. You know, so we just need to keep an eye on that and accept that that's the reality. I think if things didn't change, a lot of us would get pretty stale in our roles. Yeah. As I often say, I'll leave you with this thought: if it was easy, our businesses wouldn't need us.
Well said. Excellent ending. Love that. Thank you to everybody again. Thank you to Kevin and Barry. We'll have a recording posted, whether in the community or in the landing page. We will send it over your way. And you guys have a wonderful weekend and the rest of 2025, right?
We will indeed.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
And now I'm unable to close. So people are just hanging out. Let's see.
I think I can end the webinar. I think I'm still.
Oh, I think we figured this out last time. Perfect. We will end. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everybody. Bye.